Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills. Tony Wiggins, host of Locked On Jaguars. It's time to talk about the most important thing or things for each team to do to win this football game. Tony, 0-2 Jags coming into Orchard Park. What's on the top of the list? What are those top three things that have to be true for Jacksonville to come in and give the Bills their first loss of the season?
All right, the first thing is mental. The first thing is you got to leave the stink of last week. Don't get on a plane with it. And that's probably easier said than done because you can be motivated by it, but even sometimes that is bad because now you're pressing and you're trying too hard. So this is a new game. You have to treat it like a corner that just got beat for a touchdown. Next play, next game, start all over. And functionally in the football game, I think some of the things that they have to do is make sure that when they're on the field defensively, obviously contain Josh Allen in the pocket. Do not let him on 3rd and 5 scramble for 6 yards. You have to get them off the field on 3rd down. And then when you're on offense and you're Jacksonville, obviously the goal is to make sure you convert 3rd downs. And I think they'll have some success at doing that. I really believe they have to score touchdowns when they cross the 50-yard line. They have to finish drives with touchdowns. And one of the ways that they can do that is maybe go with some max protect and try to hit Brian Thomas Jr. deep. He is a real good football player. He is fabulous. I think he is a future superstar. He should be the guy that Trevor Lawrence goes and tells ownership, look, whatever you got to do for the next 10 years, that's my dude, because he has been outstanding. He's been open a lot more than his statistics will suggest. But I think they have to learn who to lead with. You can't just use your depth and keep running all of these different combinations. No, when you're struggling, you have to look at your best players, the dudes that you gave all of this money to, the dudes that you invested all of these resources in. On offense, it has to be Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Brian Thomas Jr. And I don't care if you have to go to them until Buffalo stops them. You continue to do it. You put pressure on them by using your best players, even if you have to dial something up. And you can't keep going with this, well, we got all of these weapons and all of these people rotating in and out. No. Go with your best players until you find an identity and win the game. But when they cross the 50-yard line, they have to get touchdowns, because if they don't, I think they're going to end up losing yet another close game on the road.
Tony, it's interesting that you talk about the best players, the identity, and you bring up Brian Thomas Jr., you bring up Travis Etienne, who I expected you to say. But as I've thought a lot about Jacksonville and what team they were going to be this year, I was mindful of some of the new pieces that they have on the offense, but I kept on saying to myself, well, they got Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. Well, Evan Ingram, obviously, the pre-game injury kept him out last week, but Christian Kirk, 2 catches in 2 games. Like, what's happening there?
Drops against Miami. And that's what I talk about extending possessions. He had a drop on 3rd down. If they keep that, Miami probably doesn't win. Travis Etienne fumbled too. They don't win if Travis Etienne just walks into the end zone and makes it 24/7. But you think back, we only think about plays that are missed at the end of games. There are plays at the beginning of games too on 3rd down that if you convert them, it causes the game to go in a totally different direction. Yeah. And then just last week, Denzel Ward knows they weren't letting him get open. Last week, Christian Kirk, he might as well not even have been out there, because it was tough sledding for everyone because Trevor was running for his life again. But the couple of times that they did hit something, you saw some max protection. You saw it when Myles Garrett was not in the game and his rotation was in. They were able to get downfield. And then you saw at the end of the game when they were on the 2-yard line, they went for a little slant and go that was wide open, but Trevor didn't have a chance to get to it, and he got sacked for a safety. So they just have to know that they have to come out and get their best players involved. And right now, Evan Ingram, even in week 1, wasn't considered one of their best players that day, and neither was Christian Kirk. And it's perplexing, because you would have thought coming into the year that those guys would be the leaders, and then you sprinkle in and bring Brian Thomas Jr. along slowly. That hasn't materialized. It's clear that he's the most talented weapon on that team other than Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, he's got some vertical elements to his game that are really impressive. And I wondered, me, I'm a draft guy, Tony. Yeah. And so I was wondering about Brian Thomas, because you watch him at LSU, it's like, man, this is really good. He can run by everyone and catch the ball down the field, but like, how much more is there to his game? I think that they've already unlocked a lot of that. And I think he's got a lot of potential, and he's certainly shown that through 2 games. Tony, when I think about the keys for the Bills to get their 3rd win of the season, 3 things come to mind. Number 1 for me is that the Bills' offensive tackles need to meet the moment. Bills extended both of their tackles this offseason. Deion Dawkins at left tackle, who I think has developed into one of the premier offensive linemen in the league. And then right tackle Spencer Brown entering his 4th season. He was scheduled to be a free agent after the year, and the Bills went ahead and extended him to a big contract, $18 million a season. You got an expensive pair of tackles. They've been great through 2 games. We're also talking about Arizona, who doesn't have much in the way of edge rushing talent, and Miami, who, Jalen Phillips is a great player, but still coming back from the Achilles, right. And they don't have Bradley Chubb. They're playing rookies and Emmanuel Ogbah. They haven't been tested like they're going to be tested against Jacksonville with Joshua Hines Allen. So we no longer have Josh Allen and Josh Allen. I threw a celebration for that this offseason, man. That was tough to deal with. And then Trayvon Walker, number 1 pick entering year 3. I think he's kind of really stepping into his stride here. A player that was always going to need a little time. The appeal there was always the upside with the physical traits. I think you start to see that manifest itself into playmaking. And so that's a big test. It's a new test for this Bills offensive line. And so I think they're going to be really important. So the offensive tackles for the Bills need to meet the moment. Number 2 is they got to be able to beat man coverage. Like we've already kind of talked about, it's a new test for Buffalo. They've not seen man coverage like this yet this season. And, I think it's obviously going to hurt Jacksonville to not have Tyson Campbell. But, I think one of the fair questions that people might have about the Bills is, do they have wide receivers that can consistently beat man coverage? Well, we're going to find out. Now, I think there's some challenges with playing a lot of man coverage. I think that opens the door for Josh Allen to maybe run the football. Is that offset by, his left hand and the injury that he's kind of playing through there? Is that going to limit his appetite to run? We'll find out. But if receivers can beat man coverage, that's going to be important. I'm looking at Khalil Shakir. I'm looking at Dalton Kincaid, looking at Curtis Samuel as the players that need to be the catalysts and that capacity. Number 3 for me is disciplined defense. I hate to use the word desperate in week 3, but Tony, they can't fall to 0-3 to Jaguars. That's a tough spot to be. I know that they've gotten out of some holes in the past, right? But that's going to be a really, really tough situation, especially listening to Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence coming out of the Cleveland game and the messaging. It feels like this is a huge moment for Jacksonville in this season. Maybe a road trip against an AFC contender is exactly what they want to get their season on track. And I think the Bills need to be ready for, to some level, a desperate Jacksonville team that's looking to get their, to get the season going. And Doug Peterson, I have questions about him. I think in 2 situations now we've seen the more his fingerprints get on an operation, the worse it gets. I thought he caught lightning in a bottle in 2017. Yeah. And congratulations, they won the Super Bowl. And that's going to get you a lot of opportunity. But I'm concerned how things played out in Philly. I'm concerned how things are playing out in Jacksonville. I will say this, though. He's creative. Yeah. And so what does he have up his sleeve to try to find an edge against the Bills, who have a lot of newness on the defensive side of the football, including having to play several backups in the back 7 due to injuries? And so you better be disciplined and be ready to handle any curveballs that come your way from Doug Peterson and the Jaguars. Yeah,
you made a very interesting point about our defensive linemen. And I could echo that about yours because, with, I hope I say his name correctly, Epinesa or Epinesa or the kid Boudreaux from Miami. And then Von Miller can still give it to you. He said, he's been showing it that if you forget about him, he's still, I think, a first ballot Hall of Famer with a bullet who still has some stuff in his system. But they just play in a certain way, man. They play. They just have this identity. It's like a computer program, and they're gonna go out and be themselves. That's the reason why I think it's gonna be hard for the Jaguars to win, because they're still searching. Now, in that searching, they're a very talented team that can make explosive plays out of the passing game with Travis Etienne, the run game with Travis Etienne, and of course we mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. And it'll be just my luck and your luck that Christian Kirk steps up and has a big game this week, right? That's usually the way it works. I'm sitting there poo-pooing him, and you asked about him, and then all of a sudden he steps up and he does exactly what you're afraid he might do.